Hi everyone, I am attorney Lilian from Lily Legal, where we help our clients get status for themselves and for their families using the U.S. immigration law system. So today, I want to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, which is how to ace your marriage green card interview. Okay, this is the final step, right? This is the last step that you have before you can either get approved or the officer wants more information from you before this making a decision. Okay, so I am so excited to get into this topic with you. Now, before we get into that, if you would like to schedule a private consultation with me, you can do that. All my contact information is in the description to this video, and you can also call my phone that is on the screen. So now that we got that out of the way, let's get into how to ace your marriage green card interview. This is something that I've talked about before on my channel, but I really wanted to talk about it again today because I just had. I have a few marriage based interviews coming up for my clients, and I've had to prepare them for their interviews. So I thought this would be a great time to talk about this because I've had to do multiple of these lately. So let's get into it. So the first thing you need to do to ace your interview is have some confidence, okay? Have some confidence in yourself and in your relationship that you two know each other. You know you live together. You know you've been building a life together. So have some confidence. And just so you know, if you have questions that come up as I'm talking about these topics, go ahead and put it in the comments. Even if you're watching on the replay, I do go back and respond to your questions. I typically respond on Fridays. So go ahead, put your questions in the comments. It might take me a week to get to it, but I always answer your questions, okay? So go ahead and do that. Again, if you're watching on the replay, do that as well. Now, like I said, first thing you need to do is have some confidence that you know your relationship, you know your partner, you have been building a life with your partner. So know that the questions that are going to come up are going to be about your relationship. So have some confidence in that. And then, right? If you are still so concerned about your answering the questions correctly and you're overthinking it, I'll tell you what I do with my clients. Okay, so remember, I want you to have some confidence about your relationship while you're going into the interview. But I also want you to do something, right? This is something I do with my clients that have marriage interviews coming up, which is we do a mock interview. Okay, for all my clients that have marriage based interviews coming up, they already know that one thing they will do with me is a mock interview. So before we get to the actual interview, I'm going to be asking you some questions about your relationship, okay, about your family. And if you are nervous, this is great, right? So for my clients that are nervous about the actual interview, this is always a good first step because they come in, I go through a list of questions with them, and they feel better because now they know, like, oh, there's a issue here, or oh, we got this, everything is good. But you need to know the type of questions that you're going to get before you get to the interview. Okay, that's really important. That's going to help build your confidence because if you are nervous, it's like trying to take a test that you've never taken before, right? What do? You practice, you study, right? And studying is living your life, right? Remembering the little things in your life. And it's okay to not remember everything, um, but the important things you should remember. Okay, so I do go through that all with my clients. These typically take an hour or more. when I'm doing them. Your actual interview may be like 20 minutes, but they may also be like 2 hours. So you really, what I try to do is make it as realistic as possible. And and not only do I make it realistic for you, I'm going to probably ask you more questions than the officer is going to ask you. That's just what it is. I'm probably going to ask you more questions than the officer is, but that's a good thing. Okay, that is a good thing because that means you can see like the type of questions. So when I do these mock interviews, I always tell my clients, like, listen, you might not get these exact questions, but these are the type of questions that the officer is expecting you to have answers to. Okay, so keep that in mind. So I'm going to go over some of those questions with you today. Bonus. So if you stay till the end, I will be going over some of the questions that you can expect um, at your interview. And right, not only am I going to go over it, I'm going to also go over the nuances because there's certain things that people don't think about that makes a difference, right? That can make a correct answer seem like a wrong answer. Okay, so I'll be going over those as well. So stick with me. So first, I want you to have confidence, and the surefire way for you to gain that confidence, if you lack it at the moment, is to practice. Right? Look at the type of questions that people have been asked. Like I said, with my clients, we do a whole mock interview to get you ready. So that's the first step. The second thing that you need to do to ace your interview is to bring the documents, right? So when you get your interview notice, it will tell you what documents the officer wants you to bring to the interview, right? It tells you. And if you do not bring those documents, it can lead to you having a great interview, but the officer not being able to approve your case right away. And you really want to avoid that. So again, with my clients, we do a whole checklist of things to bring with them to the interview because I want to make sure that you are not missing any documents. Okay, we don't want to get there the day of the interview and it's like, oh, I didn't know I had to bring my original marriage certificate. I didn't know I had to bring my original divorce decree. We want to avoid all of that. Okay, we want to avoid it and get you approved the same day or shortly thereafter. So you definitely want to make sure that you look at your interview notice and that you look at all the documents that are required of you and the suggested documents too, because guess what, even though they're suggested, if you have them, bring them with you because it's just going to make your case stronger. For example, if you have joint bank accounts, those are suggested to bring to the interview. But if you do have it and you're using it, bring those out. Right? Bring those out, bring it to your interview because that just helps the officer see more documentation of your relationship. Right? Remember, the purpose of the interview is for the officer to gauge your relationship and to see if they should approve your case or not. That's really what it is, right? If you fail your interview, right, the actual questions part of it, sometimes if you have enough documentation and those inconsistencies are not that great, the officer may still be able to approve your case. But if you don't have any documents and you didn't answer the questions correctly, or there's inconsistencies in your testimony, the officer's hands are tied. Right? How can they approve your case that's based on your marriage, but you can't answer basic questions about your marriage and you don't have any documents to prove to them that your marriage is real, right? That you two have joint assets, you have joint financial responsibilities, you live together. All those things matters. So, I talk about including those in your initial filing, but remember, if you just got married, Let's say you got married in June, you file in July, you probably don't have a lot of documents. You may have just opened a bank account. That's great. But then you will most likely only have one statement before you file. Now your interview is like a year later, and the office is looking at whether, okay, stick with me here, whether you have been building a relationship since you filed, right? So if you go to the interview and you don't have subsequent bank statements, right? You don't have a bank statement from August through the date of your interview, the office is going to assume that you opened the account just for the filing. Okay, so it's really important that you look at your whole picture when deciding what documents to take with you to the interview. I typically, for my clients, there's no choice, right? When I know what top, when we already talked about the documents you have, you open a bank account, you live together, you have all these things. When it's time for the interview, I give you a checklist of things to bring with you. And that includes bank statements since the last bank statement you gave me that we filed. It is so important to not only prepare for the questions that you're going to be asked about your relationship, but to be prepared with documentation of your relationship for your interview. It is so, so, so important. Okay. I've had situations where the interview, the questions part went great, but there was no documents. Sometimes the officer has a hard time um, justifying approving a case when there's no documents. And you don't want that to be your situation at all. And, my job always is to set my clients up to actually win, right? That's my only goal here, is to set you up to win. So when I give you, when I give my clients a whole list of things to bring to the interview, or things that we need to file, or things that they should be getting together after we file to prepare for the interview, it's not that I want you to like suffer, right? I just want you to win. And in order for you to win, you have to really put in the time to get those documents. Don't tell me that you're not able to get your bank statements, because guess what? You can get it online. You can go to the bank and actually have them printed out for you. There's so many ways for you to get those that that's not an excuse. And the officer that's interviewing you is not going to accept that as an excuse, because they know we live in 2022 now. Everything is online, and you should be able to get documents easily online. Okay. So as much as I want to tell you, like, oh, it's okay if you don't have, documents. Yes, it's okay, but you have to have something, right? You have to have something to back up your relationship other than the testimony that you give at the interview. Now, speaking of the testimony that you give at the interview, you really, you know, I told you to look at the type of questions, but also look at your, what's the nice way to put it? Your demeanor, right? When you're answering these questions. Remember, the officer is not your enemy. So don't approach them in a combative way. If you don't understand a question that they ask, don't go ahead and answer it because you don't understand what they're asking you. That's really one of the main things I want you to get out of this section is, if you do not understand the question, do not answer. If you do not understand the question, do not answer it. You are allowed to ask the officer for clarification. If there's a word the officer used that you don't really understand, it's okay to ask the officer what they mean, or what does that word mean if you do not understand it. Remember, some of these officers have hundreds of interviews a week. with immigrants with varying levels of English language skills. So understand that you are able to ask those questions when you don't understand, and you should not answer a question that you do not fully understand. Okay, you should not answer a question that you do not fully understand, because that's the fastest way. The fastest way for you to have inconsistencies is to answer a question that you do not understand. Okay, so that is that part. Now, I want to, like I promised, I will go over some of the type of questions that you should know. Okay, these are non-negotiable. These are things that if you if someone asks you about your relationship, you should know, right? Like, when did you two meet, right? When did you meet? Where did you meet? How did you meet? Did someone introduce you? Those are things that both of you should know. Most, and as I'm saying that, I'm realizing that, most couples may not remember the exact date, the exact moment that they met, all those things. But for immigration purposes, you are expected to know the answer to those questions. I know it sounds crazy, because an average US citizen couple are not expected to know every single detail of how they met, or to be able to easily just tell you in detail how they met. But for immigration purposes, you are expected to know those. So you should know how you met, where you met, when you met, if someone introduced you, who introduced you, if you met at a party, whose party was it? Okay. If you met online, that's great. But what app? Was it Facebook? Was it, Plenty of Fish? All those things. Like, what app did you meet on? That's okay. And I've had people like shy away from saying that they met on a dating app. And I'm like, it's 2022 in America. A lot of people are on dating apps. So it's nothing new to the officer. So the first set of questions is how you met, where you met, when you met, right? And then, where did you go on your first date? Or what did you do on your first date? When was that? Right? Because, again, average person might not need to know that, but you that's applying for immigration benefits do need to know that. Okay? You need to know um, where you went on your first date. And by that, I mean, by that, you need to know it. I don't mean you need to know the exact dates, the exact what you were wearing. If you do, that's great, right? The more detail you know about how you met and all of that, the better. But if you don't know those details, it's fine too. But you should be able to know, was it in the summer? Was it in the winter? Right? Was it in spring? You should know what year you met. You should know where you met. If you know you went to a restaurant but you don't remember the name of the restaurant, what type of restaurant was it? Was it Italian? Was it Japanese? Was it Chinese? Like, all those things matter. So even if you don't remember the exact date or the exact name of the restaurant, if you remember the type of food it was or where it was, right? That's also, to me, that's acceptable. Okay. So you want to have details, but you don't want to get so bogged down in the details that you miss the essence of the whole thing. You want to know when, who proposed, how they proposed. You want to remember that. Okay. And then you want to remember details about your wedding. And that includes, even if it was just the two of you at the ceremony. Okay. You want to remember, where did the ceremony take place? Who did the ceremony? Was it at City Hall? Was it a big church? Did you do a big wedding? Did you do a small wedding? All those things matter. And then if you did a big wedding, did you have bridesmaids? Did you have groomsmen? Did you go on a honeymoon? Have those details. You know, again, these questions are questions that you should know about your wedding day. They're not going to be asking you like, intricate details about your wedding. But if you had a big wedding, expect questions about, the wedding itself. Okay. If you went on a honeymoon, where did you go? When did you go? All those things. And then your daily life. You need to know questions about your daily life. Because guess what? I know who gets up first in my household. Who, if we use an alarm, if we watch TV, what type of phone we use. Those are the type of things, like when I talk about daily life. Who cooks? Where do you go grocery shopping? What type of food do you eat for breakfast, lunch, dinner, typically? Where does your spouse work? Where do you work? Right? What time does your spouse get home from work? Who does the dishes? Who does the laundry? Do you have a laundry, washer and dryer in your home or your apartment? Or do you have to go somewhere to do your laundry? Right? Just information about your daily life. That's what they're really looking at. Not just, when did you meet, stupid intricate details, but they want to know your actual life. And if you live with, let's say you have stepchildren or you live with roommates, those are important. If you live with your in-laws, the questions about who you live with, what's their routine, how do you communicate with them, how's your relationship with them, all those things are going to come up. Okay, so just know whatever details about your life um, that is available to the officer can be used to ask you questions. So for example, if you live with your in-laws and the officer is asking, okay, you know how often do you have dinner together um, on a weekly basis? What does your mother-in-law do for a living since you two live together? When does your father-in-law get home from work? All those things are things that if you live with someone, um, you're expected to know, right? It doesn't mean that you know it, or that you pay attention to all those things, but just know those details lead to more questions. Okay, so the questions that are out there might not be, like I said, it's a general idea of the type of questions to expect, but just know, depending on your answer to those questions, more questions are going to come up. Okay, if you live with, let's say, you have step children that you live with, the question of where do they go to school? How do they get to school? When was the last time um, they went to school? Do you drive them to school? Um, when was their last doctor's appointment? Things like that matters, because if you are a step parent and you're living in the same household as a child, you're expected to um, at least know the minimum things about the child. So just know that's where those questions are going to come up. And again, depending on the type of questions, the answers you give to these questions is going to lead to more questions. Now, my favorite questions are about your home, right? How much your rent is, how you pay your rent, what color your comforter is, um, who sleeps on what side of the bed. Mm. And then my absolute favorite question that um, is asked is, and I've had this asked multiple times in multiple interviews, is, ready for it? If this office was your bedroom, where would everything be? Including the windows, the doors, the closet, the dressers, the beds. If you have a standing lamp, like whatever is in your bedroom, where would it be if this office was your bedroom? I love that question because it is one of those questions that the officer like takes so much notes on. So much notes. And if you can get that right, it's great. It's great. So I always try to cover that with my clients so that they are not surprised if that's a question, and that it also helps them do like the basic exercise of going home and, oh, I didn't notice that was there, or oh, is this on my left or my right? Oh, is that the color of the comforter that we're using right now? So it's those type of questions are great because it forces my clients, after we do the mock interview, to really go home and look around. Because sometimes you're living in a space and you go to work, you come back, you just want to relax. You're not really looking at all the other things going on. But guess what? Once I do the mock interview, people go home and they look around and they pay attention to what's actually going on in their home, so that when it's time for the interview, and they ask you, okay, in your bedroom, what type of window coverings do you have? You know, okay, we have blinds, but we also have curtains, or we just have curtains, no blinds. So those type of questions may seem like, who cares what type of curtains I have, or what type of window coverings I have, or what type of comforter I have, or the color of my sofa. It doesn't matter in the average everyday world of everyday conversation, but for immigration purposes, it matters. It really, really matters. So you really want to take the time and look at your home, look at where things are, and pay attention to all of those things. And I can tell you, in my home, sometimes, you know, I will put stuff somewhere, and my husband will have to ask me, like, where is this? Right? Where's the toothpaste? Where's this? And I will have to show him where it is. It doesn't mean that we don't live in the same household. It's just he doesn't pay attention to it, right? If I do the grocery shopping and I put all the stuff away, he might not know where everything is. He just knows if it's needed, it's there. That's sometimes that's all your spouse knows, is that if it's needed, it's there, and they don't have to think about it. But for immigration purposes, you do have to kind of think about it. Okay. The next set of questions are about your families, right? How many brothers and sisters, your parents' names, where they live, the last time you saw each other's families or talked to each other's families, um, what language, yeah, what language your spouse's family speak. Do you send them money? And if you do, how is the money sent? I know. Most people don't know, or don't pay attention to that, but that's a question that could be asked. And and that's an important question, especially if it's on your um, bank statements that you send money through Western Union, um, RIA, all those money sending apps or things. SendWave is another one. You may get a charge on your bank account that says SendWave or that says RIA, and your spouse that's not sending money to family that's outside of the US may not know what that is. Okay, your spouse may not even know what RIA is, what SendWave is, or that you send money internationally with Western Union. Like, it's okay, but but in everyday life, it's okay. But for your immigration interview, you really want to pay attention to your bank statements and know what the charges are, especially if it's not something like typical, right? It's not going to Dunkin' Donuts. It's not, you know. going grocery shopping. It's something that is, like I said, examples, Western Union, SendWave, that the officer can look at and know that, like, they know these things. That's the other thing. They know these things. They know how people send money, right? They know people send money through Western Union. They know people send money through SendWave. They know people send money through RIA. So they pay attention to that. So if they see it on your bank statement, they can ask your US citizen spouse that may not even know what any of that means. Oh, what is this? And I've had this happen. Okay. I'm not telling you anything that I haven't seen happen. So they can ask those questions. So you need to make sure that you are communicating with your spouse when when you're sending money or when you're spending on things, so that they know what's actually going through your bank account. Okay, communication is key when it comes to basically remembering things for your interview, because you don't want to, like, you're not going to memorize what's on your bank statements. But if your spouse has told you that they send money through Western Union or they send money through um, RIA, you know, oh yeah, the that's the service my spouse uses to send money to her family or to his family, and that's it. Okay, you might not know every time they send money, but your bank account shows it. So those type of things you need to pay attention to. You really need to pay attention to. You need to know, like I said before, each other's families. How many siblings does your spouse have? And what's their names? Okay? You need to know. You need to know. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Even if they're not, they're not close to their family, but you should still know how many siblings they have, even if you've never talked to them. And sometimes the siblings are not in the US, so you may never have met them, you may never have spoken to them, and that's okay. But you should still know who they are, right? You should still know that he or she at least has siblings, and their names, all of that. So those are important questions. And then as far as what you do for fun, right? Do you watch TV? Do you go out? Do you play sports? All those things matters. Okay. Your spouse may never turn on the TV, right? They may not have a favorite TV show, but they may be obsessed with someone on YouTube and they watch their stuff all the time, right? So it's just a matter of, like, don't assume, do not assume that you have to have a favorite TV show. I don't know what your favorite TV show is. I know people search online for type of questions and that one comes up, but we live in a day and age where some people don't have um a TV service like Spectrum or Xfinity or anything like that. They just have Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, and that's okay. Your favorite show might be on those apps. Your favorite thing to watch might be on YouTube, and that is okay. But you should know what your spouse is into, as far as their hobbies, as far as how they relax, right? And then my absolute favorite question that really can go left um, is, what did you eat for dinner last night? Right? Because the conversation might be like, oh, so you two, did you work yesterday? No, I didn't work. I was home all day with my husband. Great. So what did you two have for dinner last night? This, one spouse says, oh, we had chicken and rice. The other one says, oh, we had beans and plantains. Hmm. Okay. There's no way you and your spouse ate together and one person says they had chicken and rice and the other person says they had beans and plantains. Unless of course you ordered different things or whatever, but you should know what your spouse ate last night and what you ate. Okay, that's what, like I said, those are my type of favorite questions because it's questions that you should know, right? It's questions that you should know. And typically, what I do um, for interviews when I go with my clients to interviews is as we're going, leaving the parking lot, I'm like, oh, so what did you do last night? What did you do over the weekend? What did you eat last night? So those type of questions are questions that the office is going to ask. How did you get to the interview? Did you drive? Did you take the train? Did someone drive you? And if you drove, whose car did you come in with? All those things may seem, all those things may seem trivial to you, but for the officer, it tells them whether your relationship is real. Like it leads them to believe, oh, okay, they should know what they did last weekend if they telling me that they spend the time together, right? If you're telling the officer that you spend all last weekend, Saturday and Sunday together, they expect to they expect you to know what you did. Even if it's just, oh, we stayed home and watched TV. Okay, what did you watch on TV? Oh, we just flipped through the channels. Okay, that's fine. You're not expected to do like, oh, we went bungee jumping or we jumped out of an airplane. Like, no, they're not expecting anything that extravagant, but they need to make sure that your stories line up, right? There's no inconsistencies because once they see major inconsistencies, um, they're not going to approve it the same day. If there's major inconsistencies in your statements, they're most likely going to step back, look at the evidence, look at what you already submitted, and most likely send you a notice of intent to deny with all your inconsistencies and give you a chance to respond and explain them. In some situations, you can. In some situations, oof, it cannot be explained. Okay. So it's really important that you take the interview seriously. It's really important that you take the interview seriously and know that it is your chance to show the officer that your relationship is real without documents, right? It's your chance for the officer to hear from you, to hear about your relationship. And if there's like little things that come up at the interview that the officer laughs at, and then just know they're probably going to ask your spouse about it, right? Um, I've had interviews where one spouse, like, I'll give you a great example. So the non-US citizen was asked, where did you meet your spouse? And they said, POF.com. It's a dating app. So then the officer's confused and was like, oh, they've never heard of POF. What is that? Poof. Okay. He writes it down. And then when the US citizen comes in, he's like, oh, so how did you meet your spouse? And where did you meet? We met on a dating app. What dating app? Plentyoffish.com. POF.com. Right? So it may seem in the beginning like, oh, what type of dating app is that the officer has never heard of? Because guess what? Like I said before, they pay attention. They know almost all of them, right? Because they know people meet on these and get married and for immigration benefits. So they pay attention and they know what's out there. So when the officer didn't recognize by the POF.com what that was, like what website was it? They didn't recognize it. It's not in their, memory of all the dating apps out there. So when the US citizen came in and said plentyoffish.com, the officer immediately was like, oh, that explains the POF. And the officer literally turned to me and was like, huh, that's what he meant by POF. I'm like, yep, that's exactly what he meant. And it was a whole laugh because it's something that sometimes trips the officers up too because they're not sure what you mean by that. And it can be explained. So don't be too nervous. It is nerve wracking, right? One thing to know, it is going to be nerve wracking. You're going to be nervous, but just know the officers used to nervous people in their office. Okay. They're used to you being nervous. They're used to people being nervous. But the best way, the best way to reduce your level of anxiety about this interview is to just be prepared. Okay, be prepared. Know your relationship. Pay attention to your house. Pay attention to your spouse. Um, ask each other questions. Um, favorite holidays, favorite food, favorite restaurant, things like that. That you may not know. You can ask. Have those conversations. Um, know what um know what type of questions the officer is going to ask, but just use that as a guideline to really have a conversation with your spouse, to really look around your house, to really prepare yourself. And the more prepared you are for the interview, the more you know each other, the less nervous you're going to be, and the more the officer is going to really see you and your relationship. And you know, some people get hundreds of questions, and some people their interviews like 20 minutes because they're able to convey to the officer quickly that their relationship is real. So you really want to take your time and prepare, prepare for your interview. Okay. So that is what I have for you today. If you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the comments. I want you to ace your interview. So if you have questions, please put it in the comments. I will go back and respond. I will be responding to a bunch of comments that I received over the week today. So go ahead, put it in the comments so that I will be able to respond to you. And yeah, if you want to schedule a private consultation with me, as always, all my contact information is in the description to this video. And if you are watching in a place where you can subscribe, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my uploads. If you like this video, please go ahead and hit the like button. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, go ahead and share it with them, because guess what? All our goals should make sure that people ace their interview and get their green card. Okay, that is why I do these videos, to help you get to your approval and have your green card or citizenship in your hand. That's what we want. Okay, so once again, I am Lilian Chukura. I am the owner of Lily Legal, where we do immigration law and we do it really well. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next week for more Immigration Live. Bye.